The Emperor of All Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee. Picture this. You wake up one morning with a weird numbness spreading through your head. Not your typical headache. Something deeper, more unsettling. The kind of sensation that makes your stomach drop because you just know something's seriously wrong. This was Carla Reed's reality in May 2004. At 30 years old, she was juggling 3 kids and a classroom full of energetic kindergartners. Then strange things started happening. Mysterious bruises appeared on her back like odd-shaped continents, then faded away. Her gums turned an alarming shade of white. This woman, who'd spent years chasing 5-year-olds around, suddenly couldn't walk from room to room without crawling on her hands and knees. The doctors? Completely baffled. Probably migraines, they said. Try some aspirin. But the aspirin just made her gums bleed even more. Finally, after Carla insisted on blood tests, her phone rang the next morning while she was shopping at a fish market. The nurse's voice crackled with urgency. "Come now," she said. "Come now." What came next shattered everything. Leukemia, one of its most violent forms. Her odds of being cured? About 30%, roughly 1 in 3. So what exactly is this terrifying, shape-shifting monster we call cancer? Where did it come from? And why has it become the defining plague of our generation? For thousands of years, it's been humanity's most intimate enemy, an adversary that literally grows from within our own bodies. Today, we're diving into a book that reads less like a medical textbook and more like an epic biography. The Emperor of All Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee, an oncologist and Pulitzer Prize winner, tells the 4,000-year saga of humanity's war against cancer. It's packed with heroes and hubris, jaw-dropping victories and crushing defeats. By the time we're done today, you'll see cancer not as some cold medical term, but as a character in our shared human story. You'll discover how accidental discoveries, brilliant insights, and heartbreaking failures brought us to where we stand now, on the edge of truly understanding how to fight back. This isn't just about science, it's about human resilience, our deepest fears, and our most stubborn hopes. Our journey doesn't start in some gleaming modern hospital. It begins in ancient Egypt, around 2500 BC, with a crumbling papyrus. A physician named Imhotep documented 48 medical cases, describing broken bones and infections with surprisingly modern precision. But case 45 was different. He described a, quote, "a bulging mass in the breast, cool, hard, spreading beneath the skin like roots," one of the earliest recorded descriptions of breast cancer ever found. When it came time to write about treatment, though, Imhotep penned just 3 haunting words: "There is none." For millennia, that was humanity's relationship with cancer, a silent, mysterious, unbeatable nightmare. The ancient Greeks gave it a name, karkinos, their word for crab, because the swollen blood vessels radiating from a tumor reminded them of a crab's legs digging into sand. They also called it onkos, meaning mass, load, or burden. That's where we get the word oncology. But what caused this burden? Around 160 AD, the legendary Greek physician Galen proposed a theory that would dominate medicine for over 1,500 years. He believed the human body was governed by 4 fluids, or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness meant these humors were out of whack. And cancer? That was caused by an excess of the most sinister humor of all, black bile. This wasn't just some quirky ancient belief. It had massive consequences. If cancer was caused by a fluid flowing throughout your entire body, then cutting out a tumor was pointless. The black bile would just flow right back. For centuries, surgery for cancer seemed like a fool's errand. Instead, Doctors tried to purge the black bile with bizarre remedies: lead tinctures, fox lungs, goat dung, even blessed water. This dark age only began to lift in the 1500s with a rebellious young anatomist from Brussels named Andreas Vesalius. Obsessed with seeing the human body for himself, Vesalius scoured graveyards and gallows for bodies to dissect, creating the first truly accurate maps of human anatomy. But as he meticulously drew every vein and organ, he noticed something crucial missing. He found blood, phlegm, yellow bile in the liver, but Galen's glistening, oily black bile, nowhere. It simply didn't exist. Vesalius quietly buried the black bile theory, and with it, the idea that cancer was incurable. If cancer was a local problem, just a tumor, maybe it could be solved with a local solution. The door opened for a new kind of warrior, the surgeon. But surgery in the 18th and early 19th centuries was absolutely brutal. Without anesthesia, patients were strapped down, often drunk on opium or whiskey, while surgeons worked at lightning speed. Even worse was infection. A simple cut could rapidly turn into a fatal gangrenous wound. Everything changed in a remarkable 21-year span. First came anesthesia in 1846, publicly demonstrated at Massachusetts General Hospital, allowing surgeons to perform long, complex operations without inflicting unbearable agony. Then, in 1867, a Scottish surgeon named Joseph Lister, inspired by Louis Pasteur's work on germs, realized infections were caused by invisible microorganisms. He started cleaning wounds with carbolic acid, and post-surgical death rates plummeted. With these twin breakthroughs, anesthesia and antisepsis, a dazzling new era of cancer surgery exploded into being. Surgeons who'd once been timid became bold, attacking tumors in the stomach, colon, ovaries, and breast. And nobody was bolder or more influential than William Stewart Halsted. Halsted, a brilliant and obsessive surgeon at Johns Hopkins in the 1890s, believed that to cure cancer, you had to be more aggressive than the disease itself. He developed a procedure for breast cancer called the radical mastectomy. It wasn't just removing the tumor. Halsted removed the entire breast, the chest muscles underneath, the lymph nodes in the armpit, sometimes even cutting through the collarbone. He called it radical, from the Latin word for root, believing he was uprooting cancer from its source. The operations were devastating. Women were left with caved-in chests, chronically swollen arms, and permanent pain. But Halsted and his followers believed this was a necessary sacrifice. The mantra became, "Cut more to cure more." But did it actually work? After decades of data, a troubling picture emerged. While these massive surgeries did reduce local recurrence, they didn't significantly improve overall survival. Nearly half of Halsted's patients still died within 3 years, consumed by disease that had supposedly been uprooted. The problem was a fundamental flaw in Halsted's thinking. Cancer wasn't always a local disease spreading in an orderly pattern. Sometimes, even from a tiny tumor, cancer cells could break away and travel to distant organs like the lungs or liver, a process called metastasis. For these patients, radical mastectomy was too little too late. For patients whose cancer truly was local, a much smaller, less disfiguring surgery would have worked just as well. It was too much, too early. Halsted's radical mastectomy, performed on hundreds of thousands of women for nearly a century, was based on flawed logic. The war against cancer couldn't be won with the knife alone. A new weapon was needed, one that could hunt down cancer cells wherever they hid. The era of systemic therapy was about to begin. The birth of this new era came from a completely unexpected place: the chemical dye industry in 19th century Germany. As textile factories boomed, chemists raced to create new synthetic dyes. A young medical student named Paul Ehrlich started using these dyes to stain cells under a microscope. He was astonished to find that different dyes stained different parts of cells, and some even stained specific bacteria, while leaving human cells untouched. This sparked a revolutionary idea. If a chemical could specifically target and stain a microbe, couldn't another chemical be designed to specifically target and kill it without harming the patient? He called this chemotherapy, and these visionary drugs he called magic bullets. In 1910, he discovered compound 606, a drug that cured syphilis. Ehrlich dreamed of finding a magic bullet for cancer, but hit a fundamental wall. Bacteria are foreign invaders, radically different from human cells. But a cancer cell? It's a distorted version of ourselves. Finding a poison that could kill cancer without killing the patient seemed nearly impossible. The first true anti-cancer chemical didn't come from a deliberate search, but from a weapon of war. During World War I, German forces unleashed mustard gas. Years later, pathologists studying soldiers who'd survived found something strange. Their bone marrows were scorched. Their white blood cell counts had plummeted. This grotesque observation sparked an idea in two Yale pharmacologists, Louis Goodman and Alfred Gilman. Leukemia is a cancer of white blood cells. If mustard gas could decimate normal white blood cells, could a controlled version kill malignant ones? In 1942, they treated a man with lymphoma using a mustard gas derivative. The results were miraculous but temporary. Swollen glands would melt away, only to return months later. The stage was set for the father of modern chemotherapy, Sidney Farber. In a cramped, damp basement lab at Boston Children's Hospital in 1947, Farber, a pathologist tired of studying the dead, decided to try treating the living. His focus was childhood leukemia, one of the most hopeless cancers imaginable. He reasoned that leukemia, a liquid cancer floating in the blood, was measurable. He could count cancer cells, administer a chemical, and see if the numbers dropped. Farber was fascinated by Lucy Will's discovery that a vitamin-like substance called folic acid was essential for blood cell production. He wondered if giving folic acid to children with leukemia might restore normalcy. It was a horrific mistake. The folic acid didn't stop the cancer, it supercharged it, causing leukemia cells to explode. But Farber, in that disaster, saw opportunity. If folic acid fed leukemia, what if he used a chemical that blocked it, an antifolate? He obtained a vial of a yellow chemical called aminopterin from his chemist friend. In December 1947, he began treating children with acute leukemia. One of his first patients was 2-year-old Robert Sandler. The response was breathtaking. The boy's astronomical white blood cell counts stopped rising, then dropped. His enlarged spleen shrank. He started walking again. For one magical month, Robert seemed normal. It was the first time a chemical had ever induced remission in leukemia. But the remissions were always temporary. Cancer inevitably returned, more aggressive than before. Robert Sandler died in 1948. Farber had glimpsed an incandescent possibility, then watched it slam shut. But that glimpse was enough. He became convinced cancer could be cured by chemicals. What he needed wasn't just more drugs. It was a national crusade. To launch this crusade, Farber found an unlikely ally, Mary Lasker, a wealthy, politically savvy Manhattan socialite. Lasker had declared personal war on disease after her mother's death from stroke. "I am opposed to heart attacks and cancer," she once said, "the way one is opposed to sin." Lasker was a force of nature, using her husband's advertising principle of salesmanship in print. She believed medical research needed to be marketed like a product. She transformed the sleepy American Society for the Control of Cancer into a high-powered lobbying machine, the American Cancer Society. Farber and Lasker were a perfect match, the scientific visionary and the political powerhouse. Together, they began dreaming of a war on cancer. To build public support, Farber created a powerful symbol. He found a young boy with lymphoma, Einar Gustafsson, a baseball fan from Maine. Rechristened Jimmy, the boy was featured on a national radio show in 1948, where Boston Braves players surprised him in his hospital room. The public response was staggering. The Jimmy Fund became one of the most successful cancer advocacy organizations in history. Farber had learned a crucial lesson. The fight against cancer needed mascots, slogans, and advertising as much as it needed science. By the 1950s, the chemical arsenal was growing. At Burroughs Wellcome, George Hitchings and Gertrude Elion synthesized 6-mercaptopurine, which also produced temporary leukemia remissions. The pieces were falling into place. In 1955, at the National Cancer Institute in Bethesda, two young doctors, Emil Frey and Emil Freireich, decided to take a radical leap. They'd seen that single drugs only produced temporary remissions before cancer grew resistant. Inspired by tuberculosis treatment, where doctors used multiple antibiotics simultaneously to overwhelm bacteria, they wondered, what if they did the same for leukemia? The idea of treating children with a cocktail of 2, 3, or even 4 highly toxic drugs was considered insane and cruel. The leukemia ward was already being called a, quote, butcher shop. But Frey and Freireich persisted. They devised a 4-drug combination called VAMP, vincristine, emathopterin, mercaptopurine, and prednisone. The first children treated were pushed to the absolute brink of death. The chemo raged through their bodies, wiping out normal cells. But then something incredible happened. As children recovered, their bone marrow biopsies came back clean. The leukemia had vanished. These were remissions so deep they exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. But then came the devastating setback. One by one, children in remission returned with headaches and seizures. The leukemia, wiped out from their blood, had found sanctuary in the brain, a place chemotherapy drugs couldn't reach. The cancer exploded back. It seemed like the end. But in Memphis, at a new hospital called St. Jude's, an oncologist named Donald Pinkel decided to push the logic further. He devised total therapy, not just a combination of drugs, but a combination of combinations. He added radiation directly to the skull to kill brain cancer cells, and continued chemotherapy, not for months but for 2 to 3 years, long after every visible sign of disease vanished. It was brutal, total hell, as fellows called it, but it worked. By 1979, Pinkel's team announced they could cure about 80% of children with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. A death sentence had become curable. Success against childhood leukemia, and similar victory against Hodgkin's lymphoma, using a 4-drug cocktail called MOPP, ignited political fire. For Farber and Lasker, this was proof. They lobbied relentlessly for a national, goal-driven effort to conquer cancer, analogous to the Apollo program that put a man on the moon. "We are so close to a cure," Farber declared. "We lack only the will and the money." On December 23, 1971, President Richard Nixon signed the National Cancer Act, officially declaring a war on cancer and pouring an unprecedented $1.5 billion into research. The army was marching, But the war would prove far more complex than anyone imagined. One major blind spot was prevention. The war focused almost entirely on finding a cure while neglecting to ask what caused cancer in the first place. This was strange amnesia, because the first major victory against cancer had been through prevention. Back in 1775, a London surgeon named Percival Pott noticed that scrotal cancer occurred almost exclusively in young chimney sweeps. He brilliantly connected chronic soot exposure to the disease. It was the first time an environmental carcinogen was identified. By regulating child labor and improving hygiene for sweeps, the man-made epidemic of scrotal cancer vanished. But in the 20th century, another far deadlier man-made epidemic was brewing, hiding in plain sight. In the 1940s, lung cancer rates were skyrocketing. Doctors blamed everything from road tar to industrial pollution. The real culprit, cigarette smoking, had become so common that nearly 9 out of 10 men smoked, making it statistically invisible. As one epidemiologist put it, asking about a link between smoking and cancer was like asking about a link between sitting and cancer. It took 2 pairs of young outsider researchers, Richard Dahl and Bradford Hill in London, Ernst Winder and Everett Graham in St. Louis, to finally prove the connection. Their 1950s studies were masterpieces of epidemiology, comparing thousands of lung cancer patients to healthy controls and finding an undeniable link to smoking. To clinch the case, Dahl and Hill tracked 40,000 British doctors over decades. The results were irrefutable. Smokers were dying of lung cancer at vastly higher rates than non-smokers. The tobacco industry fought back with a brilliant, cynical campaign. Their strategy was simple: doubt is our product. They funded their own research to create confusion, question statistics, and insisted correlation wasn't causation. It took 3 more decades of relentless legal and political battles to turn the tide. The Surgeon General's 1964 report officially declared smoking a cause of cancer. Warning labels were mandated. And in a landmark case, Rose Cipollone, who died of lung cancer after smoking for decades, sued tobacco companies from her grave, leading to the release of internal documents exposing the industry's decades-long deception. The battle against tobacco showed prevention could work, but it also revealed epidemiology's limits. You had to know what to look for. What was the fundamental mechanism allowing so many different things, soot, tobacco, radiation, even viruses, to cause cancer? The answer would come from cracking the cancer cell's code itself. For decades, cancer biology had been split between 2 warring theories. One camp believed cancer was caused by external agents like viruses. The other believed it was internal, caused by chromosomal abnormalities. The breakthrough unifying these ideas came from studying the Rous sarcoma virus, which caused cancer in chickens. In the 1970s, 2 virologists at UCSF, Michael Bishop and Harold Varmus, hunted for the virus's cancer-causing gene, called SRC. They expected to find a foreign viral gene. What they found was astonishing. A nearly identical version of SRC already existed inside normal, healthy chicken cells. In fact, it existed in ducks, geese, mice, even humans. This was revelation. The cancer-causing gene wasn't a foreign invader. It was a distorted, mutated version of a normal gene our cells carry. They called these normal precursors proto-oncogenes. Cancer wasn't caused by something foreign being inserted. It was caused by something already inside breaking. A proto-oncogene is like a car's accelerator. Normally it's regulated. But a mutation can jam it, leading to uncontrolled growth. Soon after, another class was discovered, tumor suppressor genes. If oncogenes are jammed accelerators, tumor suppressors are faulty brakes. A geneticist named Alfred Knudsen, studying a rare childhood eye cancer called retinoblastoma, theorized our cells have two copies of these brake genes. Cancer only occurs when both copies are knocked out by mutations, his two-hit hypothesis. At last, a unified theory emerged. Cancer is a genetic disease. It arises from accumulated mutations in a critical handful of genes controlling cell growth and division, oncogenes and tumor suppressors. This explained everything. It explained how radiation and chemicals cause cancer by damaging DNA. It explained why cancer runs in families. Inherited mutations provide one hit, making people more susceptible. As Varmus wrote, cancer is a distorted version of our normal selves. This profound understanding opened the door for completely new therapy. Instead of blunt poisons killing all rapidly dividing cells, what if we could design smart drugs specifically targeting the mutated oncogenes driving cancer's growth? The first proof came with a rare leukemia called CML. Scientists discovered CML is caused by a single specific oncogene called BCAR-ABL, a hyperactive kinase acting like a permanently switched-on growth signal. A young oncologist named Brian Drucker, collaborating with chemists, found a molecule that could slip perfectly into the BCR-ABL protein and shut it off. The drug was named Glyphec. The clinical trial results were stunning. In patients given months to live, Glyphec produced complete remissions within weeks. A fatal leukemia transformed into a manageable chronic condition. It was the first time a drug had been rationally designed to switch off a cancer-causing gene. It was called the 4-minute mile of oncology. Soon after, another targeted therapy, Herceptin, was developed for aggressive breast cancer, driven by an oncogene called HER2. The era of targeted therapy had begun. But cancer always fights back. Cancer cells, through relentless mutation and selection, can evolve resistance even to the most targeted drugs. The oncogene itself can mutate, changing shape so the drug no longer fits. This led to the Red Queen's race. From Alice in Wonderland. We have to keep running, keep inventing new drugs, just to stay in place. Today, treating many cancers is a sophisticated cat-and-mouse game, mixing and matching targeted drugs and traditional chemotherapy, switching strategies as cancer evolves. We haven't found a universal cure, and likely never will. But progress is undeniable. Since 1990, cancer mortality in the United States has declined about 1% every year. That might sound modest, but cumulatively it's remarkable. The decline results from multi-pronged attack: prevention through reduced smoking, screening like pap smears and colonoscopies, and better treatments, from brutal 1960s cocktails to today's smart drugs. As one researcher noted, no one labored in vain. The future lies in knowing the enemy even deeper. The Cancer Genome Atlas Project is sequencing entire genomes of thousands of tumors, creating a complete map of all cancer-driving mutations. We're learning every patient's cancer is unique, but beneath overwhelming diversity, there's deep unity. Most cancers have mutations in the same core set of about 13 signaling pathways. This is the new frontier. The challenge is no longer just finding poisons, but finding drugs that can intelligently target these broken pathways to normalize cancer cells, or at least turn fatal disease into chronic, manageable conditions. The war isn't over, but for the first time in our long history with this disease, we're fighting on our own terms. We're learning its language, its strategy, its vulnerabilities. 4,000 years after Imhotep wrote, "There is none," we can finally write a different ending. When you finish a book like The Emperor of All Maladies, it's hard not to feel genuine awe. Awe at the sheer scale of the story, the incredible persistence of scientists and doctors who dedicated their lives to this fight, and the profound resilience of patients who endured it all. For me, a few core lessons really stand out. First is the incredible, almost humbling power of incremental progress. We love stories of sudden dramatic breakthroughs, the eureka moment. But cancer's story is about slow, painstaking, often brutal step-by-step learning. Think about it. 1,500 years just to get over black bile. Decades of failed surgeries before Halsted created a procedure offering even a glimmer of hope. Farber's horrific mistake with folic acid leading to the first chemotherapy. Each generation built on the failures and small victories of the last. It's a powerful reminder that the world's biggest changes often don't come from one giant leap, but from thousands of small, persistent steps. The second lesson is about science itself. This book beautifully illustrates how science isn't a straight line. It's messy, human, filled with ego, competition, serendipity, and most importantly, courage to be wrong. From Galen's black bile to Halsted's radical surgery to early theories about cancer viruses, oncology's history is littered with passionately believed ideas later proven flawed. But each flawed idea, rigorously tested, pushed the field forward. It taught us something new. Science's goal isn't being right all the time, but getting closer to truth by questioning our most cherished beliefs. But the most profound lesson is about cancer's nature itself. The idea that cancer is a distorted version of our normal selves is one of medicine's most haunting concepts. This isn't some foreign invader. It's us. Our own genes, our own survival pathways perverted and unleashed. Cancer is a flaw in our growth, but deeply linked to the very processes allowing us to live, heal, and regenerate. This understanding changes how we see the fight. It's not about finding a single magic bullet to eradicate a foreign enemy. It's about something far more nuanced, finding ways to control our own runaway biology, to distinguish us from distorted us. So, what can we take from this epic story? First, deep appreciation for the quiet, often uncelebrated work of scientists and doctors. Next time you hear about a new breakthrough, remember the decades of labor, countless failures, and intellectual courage behind it. Second, renewed focus on prevention. The single biggest cancer victory so far has been declining lung cancer deaths from reduced smoking. It's a powerful reminder that some of our most effective battles happen before disease begins, by understanding and changing risky behaviors. And finally, perspective. The war on cancer isn't over, but we're no longer fighting in darkness. We have a map, even if incomplete. We have weapons getting smarter every year. The goal may not be achieving immortality, but as one epidemiologist put it, ensuring, quote, "Death in old age is inevitable, but death before old age is not." Turning fatal disease into chronic, manageable conditions, giving people years or decades of life back, that's a victory worth fighting for. That was a summary of The Emperor of All Maladies by Siddhartha Mukherjee. We've journeyed through the highlights today, but honestly, a summary can only ever sketch the real thing. This book's true power is in the details. The human stories, the scientific detective work, and Mukherjee's beautiful, almost poetic way of explaining the most complex ideas. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is a journey you want to take. If anything we've talked about today sparked your curiosity or touched you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning facts. It's an experience that will fundamentally change how you think about medicine, science, and the human condition. A link to the book is in the description. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it gave you something to think about, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know this kind of deep dive is what you're looking for, and ensures you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.